The music hall was buzzing with excitement that evening. People had come from all around to watch the local piano competition. The lights were soft, the stage polished, and the grand piano gleamed under the spotlights. Everyone seemed confident, chatting about who might win and who might make a mistake. In the middle of all this, a young woman quietly stepped into the hall. She wasn't dressed in fancy clothes or sparkling shoes. Her outfit was simple, her hair pulled back neatly, and she carried nothing but a small bag. She didn't look like someone who would stand out among the crowd of competitors. As she moved toward the seating area, whispers started spreading through the audience. "Who is she?" One person asked. "Do you think she even plays?" Another laughed. A few people shook their heads, clearly judging her by her appearance. Some competitors glanced at her and smiled, confident that she wouldn't even last 5 minutes on the stage. One of the older judges leaned toward his colleague and said quietly, "You? Play piano?" The words weren't meant for her to hear, but somehow they carried across the room. Heavy with doubt, the young woman felt the tension immediately. Her heart beat faster. She had always known that people judged quickly, especially when they saw someone quiet and unassuming, but she wasn't prepared for the sharpness of the mockery in the room. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. She reminded herself why she was here, not to impress anyone with her looks or her confidence, but to share the music she had worked so hard on for years. Music was her voice, and it always spoke louder than words ever could. She found a seat at the back, keeping her head down at first. Around her, the crowd was lively. Some were laughing at the nervous expressions of other young competitors. Others were chatting about techniques, comparing past performances, but no one paid much attention to her. That was fine. She didn't need anyone's attention, she just needed her moment at the piano. As the previous competitor finished their piece, the audience clapped politely, though some were already looking at their phones or whispering to friends. The young woman stood, smoothing her clothes. She walked toward the piano with small, careful steps. Each step seemed heavier than the last because she could feel the eyes on her, some curious, some skeptical, and some openly mocking. She could hear the faint murmurs. "She looks too quiet. I bet she can't even play a simple song." But she didn't let it stop her. Instead, she tightened her grip on the edge of the piano bench and told herself, "Just play. Let your music do the talking." When she sat down, she hesitated for a moment. Her hands hovered over the keys, feeling the cool surface beneath her fingers. She could hear the audience breathing, some shifting in their seats to see her better. It was a moment that felt both enormous and terrifying. In that silence, all the years she had spent practicing alone came rushing back. Every late night, every wrong note corrected, every melody repeated until her fingers remembered it without thought. It all led to this one moment. She closed her eyes for a second, letting the world fade around her. The whispers in the room, the laughter, even the doubtful words of the judges, all of it became background noise. In her mind, there was only the piano, the music, and the story she wanted to tell with her fingers. She could almost feel the notes forming, each one a small spark ready to light up the hall. Finally, she pressed the first key. The sound was soft but clear, delicate yet deliberate. The audience shifted, some leaning forward in curiosity. For a brief moment, the room was filled with a single note, and in that note, a quiet promise. She wasn't here to be mocked. She was here to play, to show what she could do, to let her music speak in a way words never could, and as she prepared for the next note, a small smile touched her lips. She knew the first step had been taken. Now, all she had to do was let her fingers work their magic. The moment her fingers touched the keys, a quiet tension settled over the hall. The young woman's hands trembled slightly, not from fear of the music itself, but from the weight of every gaze in the room. People were watching, some with curiosity, many with doubt, and a few with open amusement. The laughter and whispers from earlier still lingered at the edges of her mind, but she forced herself to focus. Every note she played had to be deliberate. Every movement had to come from memory and practice. The first few notes were soft and careful. She didn't rush. She let the melody unfold naturally, as if she were telling a story only she could hear. The audience, expecting mistakes or hesitation, was momentarily quiet. A few people exchanged surprised glances, noticing the precision in her touch. Her hands moved gracefully across the keys, fingers finding the right positions with ease. The sound, though gentle, carried a confidence that contradicted her shy appearance. Despite the beauty of the opening notes, the young woman felt a flicker of nervousness. She could hear the faint smirks from some corners of the room, and the doubt in their eyes tried to creep into her mind. She paused for a brief moment, inhaling slowly. She reminded herself of all the hours she had spent practicing alone, the nights when she had stayed up correcting a single measure, the days when her fingers ached but she refused to stop. This music was part of her life, and she would not let judgment shake her focus. She began to play a slightly more complex section. Her fingers moved faster now, gliding across the keys with both precision and emotion. Each note flowed into the next, forming a melody that seemed to lift the room, drawing attention naturally. People who had been talking quietly or glancing around began to turn their heads, their curiosity growing. The laughter had faded, replaced by a quiet anticipation. Even the judges leaned forward, pens paused above their score sheets, trying to capture the depth of her talent. As she continued, she felt herself becoming fully absorbed in the music. The room around her faded. The doubts, the whispers, and the judgment all disappeared. It was just her and the piano, connected in a rhythm she had known since childhood. Every note told a story, every chord expressed her feelings, and every pause created suspense. Her emotions poured through the music, and in return, the audience began to feel it too. The young woman noticed a change in the hall. People who had mocked her earlier were now leaning in, captivated. Eyes that had been rolling in disbelief were now wide with surprise. Some whispered to their neighbors, unsure if they had imagined the skill before them. The energy in the room shifted. What had started as skepticism and mockery was slowly turning into awe. Her hands, though moving quickly, never lost control. She played with intention, her fingers dancing over the keys like they had a mind of their own. Each measure was a demonstration not just of skill, but of dedication and heart. Every mistake she had ever made in practice seemed to vanish, replaced by the confidence she had earned over years of silent work. Her music was no longer just a performance, it was a statement. For a brief moment she looked up from the keys. Her eyes met the audience, and she saw the astonishment on their faces. People who had laughed now watched in silence. The older judges, initially skeptical, exchanged glances of disbelief. The young woman smiled slightly to herself. She didn't need to respond to the mocking words. They had no power over the music she created. Her fingers were speaking louder than any insult or doubt. As the section came to an end, she allowed herself a small pause, letting the notes linger in the air. The room was quiet, almost holding its breath. She had captured everyone's attention, and now she felt a quiet surge of confidence. The path ahead was still long, there were more complex pieces to come, but she knew the first step had been a success. She had begun to turn doubt into curiosity, and she could feel the shift in energy around her. Her performance had not yet reached its peak, but the hall had changed. The audience, once ready to dismiss her, was now waiting to hear more. And in that moment, she understood something important. It wasn't about how she looked or what others thought of her. It was about the music and the story she carried through it. Her fingers were ready to continue their journey, and with every note she was slowly, beautifully, breaking down the walls of doubt that had once surrounded her. As her fingers moved across the keys, something extraordinary began to happen. The music, once gentle and careful, started to flow with strength and emotion. Each note seemed to tell a story of its own, full of life and feeling. The young woman's confidence grew with every passing moment. The trembling from before was gone, replaced by a quiet determination. She no longer played just to prove herself, she played because the music demanded it, because her heart was in every chord. The audience, who had been quietly observing her, began to shift in their seats. The whispers and skeptical glances from earlier were replaced by wide eyes and attentive faces. Some people held their breath, afraid to blink and miss a single note. The young woman could feel the energy in the room changing. The hall, which had been filled with doubt, was now filled with anticipation. Every key she pressed seemed to draw people closer into her world, capturing their attention completely. Her fingers danced effortlessly over the keys. The speed and precision were remarkable, yet every note carried emotion. She didn't just play the melody, she told a story through it. The highs soared, the lows sank with depth, and the rhythm flowed like a river, smooth yet powerful. For the first time, some in the audience realized that this performance was unlike anything they had expected. The mocking laughter had vanished completely. All that remained was the sound of music and the awe it created. Even the judges, who had initially doubted her, could not hide their astonishment. They leaned forward in their seats, eyes fixed on her hands. Some opened their mouths slightly, as if they could not believe what they were witnessing. The young woman noticed their attention, but she did not falter. Instead, she let it fuel her determination. The music was her voice, and it spoke louder than any words ever could. There was a certain magic in the way she played. It was more than skill. It was as if her fingers had a life of their own. Each note seemed to resonate not just in the room, but in the hearts of those listening. People felt the emotion behind every chord, the joy, the sadness, the excitement, and the longing. The young woman had taken something simple, a piece of music, and transformed it into an experience that everyone could feel. As she reached the middle of her performance, the complexity increased. She moved through intricate passages with ease, her hands gliding over the keys like they were an extension of herself. The room was silent except for the music, yet the silence was alive. It held the sound, amplified the feeling, and allowed every listener to connect with the performance. Even those who had doubted her most were leaning forward now. Completely absorbed, she played faster, more confidently, letting her fingers take the lead while her mind stayed calm and focused. Every note was precise, yet full of emotion. There was no hesitation, no mistakes, only the beauty of the music flowing from her heart through her hands. She felt a sense of freedom she had never experienced before. It was as if a piano was no longer an instrument, but a part of her soul. The audience began to react, quietly at first and then more openly. A few people whispered to their neighbors in amazement, pointing at her hands, unable to believe the skill they were witnessing. Some eyes glistened with emotion, moved by the depth of the music. Others sat completely still, lost in thought, feeling every note as if it were a personal message meant just for them. The young woman, completely immersed, didn't notice the reactions yet. She only knew the music and the story she wanted to tell. As the middle section came to a close, she allowed the final notes to linger in the air. They hung there like a soft breath, carrying the weight of everything she had expressed. The hall was still for a moment, as if everyone was afraid to break the spell. Then, slowly, soft murmurs of appreciation began to spread. It was the first sign that her performance was leaving an impact. The doubters had been silenced, replaced by genuine admiration. In that moment, the young woman realized something powerful. She had walked into this hall, nervous and unsure, carrying only her dedication and her love for music. She had faced mockery, doubt, and judgment. Yet here she was, transforming skepticism into awe. Her fingers had not just played the piano, they had created magic. She smiled slightly, feeling a quiet pride. Knowing that the journey she had taken to reach this point was worth every moment of struggle, the music was far from over. But the energy in the room had changed forever. The audience now hung on her every move, ready to follow her through the rest of the performance. And as she lifted her hands to continue, there was no fear, no hesitation, only the pure joy of letting her fingers work their magic, captivating everyone who had once doubted her. As the performance continued, something remarkable happened. The music, which had already captured the audience's attention, began to take on a life of its own. The young woman's fingers moved with incredible speed and precision, yet there was a fluidity and grace that made every note sound effortless. Each chord, each arpeggio seemed to flow naturally, as if the piano itself was responding to her touch. The hall, once filled with doubt and quiet whispers, now held a deep, almost reverent silence. Her confidence grew with every measure. No longer focused on the skeptical eyes or the mocking whispers, she became completely absorbed in the music. Her mind and heart guided her hands, and the melody she created seemed to transcend the piano keys. The audience could feel it, even if they didn't fully understand it. Every person in the hall was drawn into the story she was telling, a story of determination, passion, and hidden talent revealed at last. The young woman played faster, moving through complex passages that would have seemed impossible to many. Her fingers danced effortlessly, hitting every note with precision. Yet each sound carried emotion, never feeling mechanical or forced. There was a rhythm to her playing that felt alive, as if the music itself were breathing. People in the audience leaned forward, captivated, as if afraid to blink and miss a single moment of what was unfolding before them. Some of the audience members exchanged astonished glances. Those who had doubted her talent now sat in complete awe, unable to tear their eyes away from the young woman at the piano. Even the judges, who had previously been skeptical, were leaning forward, watching every movement of her hands, every subtle expression on her face. It was clear that they had never expected this level of skill or emotion. The performance was no longer just a competition. It was a display of pure artistry, something that transcended expectation and judgment. As she continued, the music built to a powerful crescendo. Her fingers moved with unstoppable energy, gliding across the keys, creating layers of sound that filled the entire hall. Each note seemed to carry a piece of her soul, and the audience felt it deeply. The melody soared and fell, taking everyone on a journey of emotion and imagination. For a moment, no one thought about the competition, the prizes, or even the earlier laughter. They were entirely absorbed in the experience she had created. There was a magic in her performance that went beyond technical skill. Every movement, every note, told a story of persistence, courage, and the quiet hours of practice that no one had seen. The audience could sense the heart behind her playing. People who had initially laughed at her now watched with admiration, some even whispering to their neighbors in disbelief. The young woman had transformed their doubt into fascination. Simply by letting her talent speak. She reached the most challenging part of the piece, a section that required both speed and control. Her hands moved like lightning, yet there was a remarkable elegance in every note. The complex passage, which might have overwhelmed many, flowed naturally from her fingers. Each chord struck with clarity and emotion, weaving together a tapestry of sound that seemed almost impossible for one person to create. The audience was spellbound, and even the air in the hall felt charged with the intensity of her music. As she neared the end of this powerful section, the energy in the room was palpable. People were sitting on the edge of their seats, fully invested in every note. Some faces showed tears, some eyes sparkled with amazement, and others were simply wide with awe. She had not only captured their attention, but had stirred their emotions deeply. The young woman's focus never wavered, her mind entirely immersed in the music. Yet she could feel the connection growing with the audience. Finally, she began to transition into the closing measures of this part of the piece. The notes softened slightly, giving the audience a moment to breathe and absorb the impact of what they had just witnessed. The energy shifted from intensity to reflection, allowing the beauty and emotion of the performance to sink in. Her hands glided gently over the keys, each note resonating fully, leaving a lasting impression. In that moment, the young woman realized the power of what she was doing. She had faced mockery, doubt, and skepticism, but now she was commanding the attention and admiration of everyone in the hall. She had shown them not just her skill, but her heart, her dedication, and the magic that comes from years of passion and persistence. The performance was far from over, but the audience had already been captivated, and she could feel their wonder and respect growing with every note. Her fingers lifted from the keys briefly, only to continue the melody, guiding it to even greater heights. The hall had been transformed. The once skeptical crowd was now completely mesmerized, hanging on her every movement. The young woman's music had become a bridge between her heart and theirs, a connection so profound that no one could deny it. She had proven that talent, when nurtured with love and dedication, could overcome doubt and silence even the harshest critics. When the last note faded into the air, a profound silence filled the hall. For a few heartbeats, it felt as though time had stopped. Everyone was frozen, unsure whether to breathe or move. The young woman's hands lingered above the keys, her chest rising and falling from both exertion and anticipation. She had poured everything into the performance, years of practice, countless mistakes, endless nights of dedication, and now the room was holding its breath. Waiting to respond, slowly the silence was broken. A soft murmur began, growing steadily into applause. The young woman's eyes widened, and a small, humble smile appeared on her face. It was a smile of relief, but also of quiet pride. She had done it. She had faced doubt, mockery, and skepticism, and she had emerged victorious not by words, but by music. The applause grew louder, filling every corner of the hall, until it became a wave that seemed to lift the very air around her. People in the audience who had laughed at her entry now stood, clapping and cheering with genuine admiration. Some had tears in their eyes, moved not only by the technical mastery of her playing, but by the emotion and heart behind every note. The judges, who had initially exchanged skeptical glances, were now on their feet, applauding with amazement. There were no more doubts, no more whispers of disbelief, only respect, awe, and a shared recognition of extraordinary talent. The young woman took a deep breath, finally letting herself relax. Her hands, once tense and nervous, now rested lightly on the keys. She looked out at the audience, noticing faces that had first doubted her now smiling in admiration. It was a moment she would never forget, the moment when her dedication and courage had transformed judgment into recognition. She realized that the journey to this point, with all its struggles and small victories, had made this triumph even sweeter. As the crowd continued to cheer, some people called out words of praise. "That was amazing." One voice shouted. "Unbelievable talent," exclaimed another. She felt a warm glow inside, not from the applause alone, but from the understanding that her music had touched people's hearts. For a long time, she had practiced in quiet rooms, her talent hidden from the world. Tonight, she had shared it, and the response was more powerful than she had ever imagined. The young woman slowly stood, acknowledging the audience with a gentle nod. She did not need extravagant gestures or words. The music itself had spoken for her. People continued to clap, some whistling, some calling her name, and some even standing to show their respect. The energy in the room had completely changed. What had begun as mockery and doubt had turned into admiration, respect, and inspiration. She had proven that appearances and assumptions were meaningless in the face of true talent and hard work. The judges stepped forward, offering words of recognition and praise. They complimented her technical skill, her emotion, and the way she had commanded the room without a single word. Some admitted that they had underestimated her, and her performance had been a powerful reminder of why talent could never be judged by appearances alone. The young woman thanked them quietly, feeling a mix of humility and pride. She knew that tonight, she had not just performed music, she had shared a part of her soul with everyone listening. As the hall slowly emptied, the applause still echoed in her mind. People spoke to each other about what they had just witnessed, their conversations full of amazement and admiration. She walked off the stage, her heart light, knowing that she had left a lasting impression. She had faced doubt, had been mocked, and yet she had risen above it all, showing that true talent, when nurtured with dedication and courage, could shine through any obstacle. Later, as she left the hall, she glanced back at the piano one last time. It had been her companion, her voice, and her bridge to the hearts of the audience. She knew that this was only one performance in her life, but it was a turning point. The night had shown her that courage and persistence mattered more than appearances or skepticism. Her fingers had worked magic, not just on the piano, but on every person in the room. She walked into the night with a sense of accomplishment, knowing that she had silenced doubt, captured hearts, and shared a gift that would be remembered long after the applause had faded. This moment would stay with her forever, a reminder that talent, passion, and perseverance always find their way to shine. Every struggle, every hour of practice, and every moment of doubt had led to this incredible triumph. And as she continued on her path, she knew that nothing could ever take away the magic she had created that night, magic born from heart, dedication, and courage.